Class, this is Dr. Gutierrez. I'm going to go over research here and provide a little overview. I think it's important to do that because I think as you're developing your research questions, it's really important to know what type of design you're actually going to be doing, right? And also, the type of methods as well. So if you don't have that information, you might be going down a very dark road and not really know what you're doing. So I think it's very important to understand. So with research in general, okay, because it can be a very scary field for many folks. There's two major types, okay, two major types of designs. One is it could either be a quantitative design or it can be a qualitative design. Okay, so a quantitative design, all right, is very number based. Okay, so that means you might be looking for information in terms of the attitudes or how many individuals experience something, so it's very number based, and you can use numbers and quantity to analyze the data and to report the information. Within quantitative research designs, you do have two major ones. You have experimental research, and then you have non-experimental research. So experimental research, that's the typical one that you see a lot in science projects and major studies, and that has to really do with something called causal. Okay, is there a direct cause between this intervention, this independent variable, and the outcome? Or does this independent variable serve as a prediction to this outcome? Okay, so it can be either a direct cause or a prediction. You have non-experimental research, which actually has to do more with correlational, or descriptive in nature. So like for example, does childhood obesity, is childhood obesity a factor, in developing type 2 diabetes, something along those lines. And so you're going to survey folks or individuals or conduct some other type of method to gather that information. So it's more descriptive. You're not really looking for a direct cause, of does, childhood obesity directly cause diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Okay, so you're not looking for that. Qualitative research design really has to do more with case study methods, and it has to do more with lived experiences and those kinds of things. I've actually done both types of studies, both quantitative and qualitative. For my dissertation, I did a qualitative case study, in fact. So it's really looking at the lived experiences of the individuals, because sometimes you can't put a number to those meaningful experiences that those people or the people have. So you kind of have to conduct interviews, to gain that insight, focus groups, observations, looking at different work samples, and conducting something known as document analysis. Okay, so doing that to determine the various themes, and then also ultimately answer your research questions. So keeping in mind in general with research questions, okay, there's a few steps that I want to recommend. Okay, so some tips. Whoops, let me move this over here. Okay, the first step that step one. The first step that I recommend is that to first find an issue that interests you. Okay, so like for example, obviously special education. You're going for the master's degree in education, so it's special education. But what in special education actually interests you? Is it the collaboration models? Is it which type of model is it? Is it the accommodations? What type of accommodation? So trying to be very specific to see what really interests you. Is it the emotional disturbance classes, or depending on where you are in the US, they might call it emotionally behaviorally disabled classrooms, EBD, or ED classrooms? Or is it the SDC setting, LH setting? Or is it the RSP setting? Is there something specific that really interests you? So really asking yourself that question and maybe writing it down, all of the different things, and then putting a number, from 0 to 5, 0 not really of interest, 5 something that's very, very of interest, and then really trying to find that out. And sometimes we know what it is. So like, for example, when I was doing my master's degree, I was really, really interested in something known as learning communities and learning cohorts, and I already knew that that was really what I wanted to study. Okay, step 2 is, one of the things you want to do is explore the issue. So you can actually do that in many different ways. So I'm going to just write here, explore. I'm trying to do 2 things here at once. Okay, you can explore the issue, and you can do that easily by just going to Google. Okay, I know it sounds funny, but I recommend that. Starting off, going to Google and typing, something, related to your subject to see what's actually out there. And you might come across a Wikipedia article or maybe something that you cannot cite. Okay, keep that in mind, but at least it gives you some ideas, and that's the starting point, right? So like, for example, let's say I wanted to research why the dropout rates, of high school students. But I wanted to be very specific. And so instead of just saying dropout rates of high schools, maybe, students with disabilities, is there a higher dropout rate with students with disabilities? So I'm going to type that in here. Is there a higher dropout rate for students with disabilities? And I probably should have put high school here. And then here you find some different journal articles, some that you might be able to cite, some that you may not. But if you notice, here's a report, and it says that students with learning disabilities are 3 times more likely to drop out of school. Okay, so at least it gives you some ideas there, and then you can kind of move on from there and kind of gather your information and your insight. So let's go back to, and then what you're going to do is you're going to go to Blackboard, or you can go through nu.edu and then access our library for peer-reviewed journals. Okay, and then you want to make sure that you ask those specific questions so that you can gather more references. All right, so let me go back to our outline here. So you want to explore the issue, okay, and that can be through a website, that can be through the library, Google, all of those kinds of things. Even asking folks around and talking to people about that specific issue, because you may find out that maybe it's not an issue at all, and maybe it's just an issue that you're experiencing, and so that's why it's also important to talk to other folks about it and things like that. All right, the third step that I recommend is to start asking those questions, okay, and then that will actually help you in determining what type of questions you want to ask. Okay, is it more about the lived experiences? Is it more about the perceptions of the students, that are dropping out, or the teachers' perceptions of what's happening with the dropout rate? Or is it more that you want to determine, what are some ways that we can prevent this? And so maybe you want to answer those questions through surveys, or maybe you want to have a number, a quantitative number to your research questions. So just start asking questions that will actually help guide you in the right way. But keep in mind, you want to really figure out, do you want to do more of a quantitative study, or do you want to do more of a qualitative study? All right, and then step 4, try to make sure not to think too broad. Okay, don't think too broad. So the key here is that you are not curing cancer. Okay, so you're just focusing in on the particular issues of interest that are of interest to you, and you're really trying to find out more insight. Okay, you may not be doing a causal, research study, or your questions may not be causal, does this actually directly cause this? Okay, because that's very difficult to do, by the way, because it needs to be randomized to, a variety of folks, and that can be very difficult to do, especially because of the ethical things that you have to consider as well. So, or is it more correlational? Does this independent variable, predict, what can actually happen? Or maybe you just want to know more about the attitudes of a specific group or the experiences of a specific group, and that's okay as well. All right, so and then step 5, I put here, refine/focus your questions. Okay, so again, you want to think very specific, and then from there, you know, go down to how does this affect maybe the individual students in a classroom, depending on what your interest is. So let's go ahead and do a little example here, okay? Because I'm all about showing and examples. So I'm going to go here to course resources here, and we are going to pull out right here where it says, should be right there, research handout. And I recommend all students to do this, by the way, because I think this will help you in guiding your and developing your research questions. So if I go down to, I believe it was, let me see where I can find that worksheet. It's really good. All of this is great stuff, by the way, but there is, I think it was page 20. Let's see. Thought it was in here. If not, I can actually post this afterwards. Well, you could look at this right here as well. If you want to do something that's qualitative, you can write your research question here and then your sub questions here. There's a really good, this could also help as well. What are the type of participants that you're looking to study or find more information about, the setting, maybe some planned activities, maybe later down the road if you want to publish your article after your capstone. The different methods of data collection also help as well. So if you're looking at maybe doing interviews, maybe focus groups or observations, then I would recommend you do a qualitative study, which means you're going to do qualitative research questions. If you're looking at more survey, does one intervention, is there a correlation between one intervention and the outcome, or does one independent variable affect something else, then I would recommend a quantitative research study, which means quantitative research questions. Okay, so keep all of those things in mind. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to actually fill out one of the worksheets. And unfortunately, I can't find it right now, but once I find it, that'll be our next video. All right, so that's it for us today. And again, I hope that this provided a little overview, okay, of research. Okay, you have quantitative, you have qualitative. Under quantitative, you have experimental research designs, you have non-experimental research designs. Under non-experimental research designs, you can have correlational or you can have descriptive. And so that's, conducting surveys, trying to find out that information. For qualitative research design and research questions, you're really looking for the perceptions, the lived experiences of the individuals of an individual group. So hopefully that helps, and hopefully with my tips right here, find an issue that interests you first, explore the issue, start asking questions, don't think too broad, remember you're not curing cancer, and then refine and focus your questions. You don't have to have a whole bunch of research questions, and that's another thing. Okay, you can just have one major research question and maybe 2 sub-research questions, or maybe you can have 3 major research questions and one of them has a sub-question. That's okay. You don't need to have 10 research questions. All right?